Every time I have got into a case, I always go. Not so easy these days, but I always physically go. Whatever it costs, it's been worth 50 times whatever we spent going there. Because you get some little insight that you just couldn't get in any other way.
One Great Case, a podcast about law to learn more about people. I'm your host, Areta Lloyd.
Today we are joined by John Campion, illustrious litigator, trusted advisor, and larger-than-life leader in the legal profession. He has been involved in some of the most consequential trials here in Canada and around the world. Welcome, John. Thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
When I met you, John, I thought you were looking to downsize and perhaps slow down. And you said, "My dear, I have been a litigator for over 50 years and I have no intention of slowing down." Now, listeners can read all about your storied career on your firm's website, Gardiner Roberts. But I would like to ask you, John, tell us something unexpected about yourself that we won't read in your professional biography.
So I have a passionate liking and attention for my children, who all of them are in media. So none have followed me in law. One has a company called the Lore Machine in Los Angeles, from which you can make your own movie. And it has become world known. He is a very capable and lovely kid. At some 42 years of age, may I quickly add. My middle child, Vanessa, is at CBC Sports, and she deals with the Olympics and the Paralympics. And my youngest is a film producer. And so I've watched them grow. And the big surprise is you can tell a lot about the person by having an idea as to who and what their children are.
That I have a feeling at some point we'll see a movie about you created by your children.
Yeah, right.
Oh, goodness. Well, thank you. So I thought it would be appropriate today having you with us and, of course, with our country being a leader in mining to discuss possibly the largest mining fraud in history. And I think it's fair to say that few other mining scandals were as dramatic or devastating as Bre-X. The regulatory legacy of this case is playing out now. So I think it's important for people to understand where the reforms came from.
In about the mid-90s, a little earlier than that, class actions started in Ontario. This was an early class action. The first ones were all started out of the blood inquiry with the tainted blood, which Harvey Strasberg and colleagues were successful in. And Harvey was the lead lawyer, along with a host of others, to lead this lawsuit against Bre-X. Now, look, our worlds are very small, just like the mining community. Harvey wasn't there when I was there, but he was a student at Faskin's. I've known Harvey since I started practice by name. He was a lawyer now in Windsor. My partner, Alan Rock, who went on to politics, finished his time in civil service and went to work for Harvey. So we all sort of know each other one way or another. And Harvey, I've had great admiration for because he's been so inventive in this field. He took on this case. And, when you hear the results and you hear what the number, you see the size of the numbers, this looks easy to win, right? Well, guess what? They didn't win against my client.
There are the details.
There are
We're
the
going to have to
details.
talk about those.
And there was an important part which he thought he possibly could go over, or we raised it and he didn't. Now, I get retained by Nesbitt Burns and the Bank of Montreal indirectly because they've got a direct interest in this case. It is a huge impact on their capital for the Bank of Montreal. So while they aren't sued, they're keenly interested, and I'm reporting to their their in-house counsel, and to that of Nesbitt Burns as well. And we put together a team, and because this was worldwide, we had actions in the United States. We had actions in Alberta, British Columbia, Quebec, Ontario. We had securities commissions or reviews all across Canada and the globe. Certainly, although they all seem to sort of cede to the Ontario Securities Commission and to the SEC in the United States. So there's a ton of action. And the real complication for someone like me in managing this, I was managing, in effect, the Canadian lawsuits, and I was overseeing the American lawsuits. And because the issues were so complicated, but the law was different in each place, the question was who was going to go first in us moving these actions forward. And it was a big complication. We had a great law firm in the United States. They are the ones who I think they brought the tobacco litigation in the United States, when they won that multiple billions against the tobacco companies. But in any event, they were wonderful lawyers, and based out of Chicago, Winston and Strong. And they ran the American side of the lawsuit, but they did it, in effect, on the direction of the bank here in Canada and me as to how fast they were going to go or not go. Now, that case was determined by whether it was fraud in the market. And that's a uniquely American doctrine which did not yet exist in Canada and has never existed in Canada.
So you've got all these actions going on.
Right.
I know that part of the strategy is determining who goes first. Tell us a little bit about what the claims were here that you were dealing with.
So the claims the major claims were fraud and negligent misrepresentation. Now, it was very hard to prove fraud against the brokers. That wasn't going to make it. But negligent misrepresentation, did they or did they not do the right of research before they went and put press releases out about what they thought was going on at the size of the gold? And it's the making announcements that is the claim. You made announcements that were wrong, and you were negligent in so doing, and we're suing you in negligent misrepresentation. So that's the main cause of action against my clients. They also sued in the same way against Walsh and Felderhoff, but they had, of course, much easier claims in fraud against these characters. As it turns out, what they had said in their own press releases just wasn't remotely true. And the idea they claimed ultimately 70 million ounces of gold, how do you get there if it turns out there's nothing? And so you've got what looks to be an easier case. Trouble was, Walsh went bankrupt. I don't know whether Felderhoff had anything left or not. And I actually don't believe that. I think that Walsh believed it. I mean, if you were the owner of a company, someone came to you and said, Mr. Felderhoff knocks on your door and says, guess what? We found gold and you've now got 70 million ounces of gold. You can say, I don't believe you? No, we just say, I'm delighted. Keep going. My stock is now worth $270 after it was worth 2 pennies. That's a big increase. Start multiplying it out. And I want to take you to a couple of, so those were the causes of action in answer to your question, but I want to take you to a few personal matters. Not about me, but the clients. So there were class actions, but there are also individual actions which stood aside pending the closure of the class action, which we won in 1999. But leave that for a second, because the individual actions continued past that point. And the two most prominent people in this crowd were civil servants from Ottawa who were maybe earning 50 grand a year, if that. And all of a sudden, they're now worth $20 million. And they are now players in a small town of civil servant Ottawa. And so they're buying up all kinds of things and they're doing all kinds of things. And they went to their financial advisors and said, should we sell some of this stock? And they said, no, because it's as good as gold. And if you sell, you're going to have to pay capital gains tax. which would be big. So they don't sell because they don't want to pay the tax. But when they bought it, it wasn't worth anything. And when it all ended, it wasn't worth anything. And they were worth nothing. And I must admit, that was a very sort of sad. It's like someone calling you and say, you just won the lottery for $20 million. And they call you the next day, sorry, we got the wrong John Campion. And you think, oh no, but you already spent the money or planned to. And so this was tough. Now we settled with those characters, as the court will know, but it wasn't very satisfactory. Yeah, because it was a tough case for them to make out in these circumstances. Now, on top of all this, there are two sort of interesting bits. One is the Felderhoff getting charged criminally in 1999 and 160 days of trial with 1,687 exhibits. The reasons for decision were 649 pages. So it was a very long criminal trial under the Securities Act. And if you actually hear the story, and Felderhoff is the last person standing, when you hear the story and you see what had happened, well, you do wonder. But anyway, the charges were all dismissed. I can't say anything more. Mr. Felderhoff's dead.
It's the salt in the wound for all these investors because
A little bit.
they
That's
recover
right.
their losses and nobody was left holding the bag either way.
Nope. Mr. Felderhoff, Mr. Walsh was dead. Walsh was dead. Felderhoff had died after the trial was done. And look at, the trouble was that the linchpin, Mr. de Guzman, who might have been able to put some light on all of this, he was dead or gone. And so, it's a perfect whodunit where they've hidden the evidence. But maybe there was nothing wrong with what Mr. Felderhoff did. That's certainly what the court found, and that's fair enough. That's what we accept. And they had to prove the case, and they didn't prove it. In the proof of that case, there were listed 20 different red flags that they used at this trial. They had evidence of it, that things like there was no geochemical reason for the gold to be in this area at all. There was no known outcrop of gold anywhere in this vast area. The location of new drill holes were never influenced by the previous drilling. Now that sounds a little weird because you're trying to show a long, continuous gold strain underneath the ground. So you'd go 1, 2, 3 down, but they were never connected to the previous drilling. The Busan geologists never went to the drill sites because it was too bloody hot, presumably. I don't know. The drill core was not properly split. As remember, I told you they split it because the reason they do that, then you've always got a preservation of what existed. So we went to mining school in Australia, and they have in Australia, in the eastern part of Australia, all the core that's ever been drilled in the history of Australia. And it's only, of course, the 1/4 of it. But if you want to go as a mining geologist and say, all right, on that big mine, what did the core look like? You can go and look at that. Quite fantastic. And knowing how mining works and knowing the characters who play in this game, how their life is rich one day and broke the next, and they're wandering these horrendous areas of the world sometimes, or sometimes they get lucky in Northern Ontario. But whatever, it is a really fabulous world for characters. And so, of course, we've got many thousands of years of people looking for gold, which isn't very useful for anything much, but because of its store value and its limited supply, it's now at $3,000 an ounce. And I remember refusing to buy it at $800 an ounce because I said, it's useless. Why would I do that? You dig it up, put it in bars, and put it underground. That's what you do with it. That's it, folks. And so why would anybody invest in it? Well, those who invested at 900, 800 are now selling it at 3,000. That's not a bad day. So then there are a whole lot of other issues. There were 60,000 meters of core logged, but no reports of visible gold. How can that be? And then they go on. There is no gold identified in petrographic samples. This huge site for preparation of this core at Busang was there, but never used much.
So, John, it's, your client was a geologist.
Yes.
And he said he went there, and
Yes.
we're never going to know what he saw because he never, you never got to the point of having him testify. So you never even got there. You said
I can't talk
cut
about
that
it.
right off.
He
So we'll
testified
never
to
know
place
what
of
he
serious
knew. It's tell us about how you fashioned your strategy. I mean, you've got these crazy red flags. You've got all these players. You're talking about a massive hit to the bank should this be successful. And
So-
you've got a media frenzy too. You've got this incredible
Yes.
media frenzy, and it's like people, they want to find some salve for their loss.
So my first strategy was to protect Egizio. He's a 35-year-old kid, and his life's passed before his eyes. And so I had to protect him from all comers, no matter what it was. He remained employed. He continued on quietly. He, had to get control of his emotional and professional reputation, and just be quiet. Just stay quiet. Stay out. Don't do anything about talking to me. And so, boom. That was job one. Job two was say, all right, we've got a team of people, and this is a big team of lawyers, and we had to have a system of communicating because I had some really smart people. So a guy called Redmond out in Alberta, and we had some kids out in my firm in British Columbia, a guy called Ward's Ranch, who he was a relatively young guy, but he was interested in class actions in this early stage of stuff. And he ultimately became a plaintiff's lawyer, and we did so well, he decided he wanted to be a judge, and was happy to be one of his supporters to become a judge out in British Columbia. So he's had a great life, but he was terrific. I always called him bushy-tailed, terrific, energetic lawyer. We had a guy in Quebec. I've just forgotten his name. He was a very senior lawyer and a really clever, smart, cool sort of guy. And I'll get his name in a second. And then we had our American lawyers, and we had to speak all the time. And there were all kinds of cases, like negligence cases or libel cases, that we had to protect people who were wanting to take pot shots. And then we began the process of, one, getting to know the mining industry in high detail altogether in Australia. Then we went to 6 different sites in Indonesia to see how it all operated. Because it is surprising. Every time I have got into a case, I always go. Not so easy these days, but I always physically go. And whatever it costs, it's been worth 50 times whatever we spent going there. Because you get some little insight that you just couldn't get in any other way, such as to Guzman. I mean, it's not comprehensible that he jumped out of the damn helicopter. Maybe because he didn't want to face any questions, but there's an easier way to escape. You don't get in the helicopter in the first place. You just keep running. And so, but just going and seeing it, one of the big things was I didn't want anybody to get this notion that somehow Egizio was not doing his job in looking at the pieces. And yes, there were other red flags which were identified, but they were identified in the criminal trial. And I don't think Egizio saw any of those, not because he wasn't looking, but it's just there weren't anything advisable. Although there are some things here which the professionals later on have looked at, but that's hindsight. So there's a very couple of important reasons is that Egizio not be put out to give any testimony until we got to the trial. It was going to come to trial. But the reason is that you don't want a witness saying be examined 5 different times from 5 different perspectives. It's very hard on a witness, and particularly at his stage. And I've had cases where people have come in with the most horrendous stories. I've had the time to tell you. And I just say, look, go away, sleep, fix the damn problem, then come back to me. And in the interim, I'm going to prepare your case, and you're going to give me nothing but tons and tons of evidence, but you're not going anywhere with anything. And they get a time to calm down, and they get perspective, and we all get perspective. And my job was to stay cool and tough as you can possibly be, and make had good relationships with the plaintiff's lawyers, good relationships with the other defendant lawyers in my own group, and generally speaking. And we developed a strategy which was relatively simple. The case was negligent misrepresentation. And for that, and don't forget, we're talking about class action now. And a class action has to have common issues. It cannot have a preponderance of individual issues, or it won't go forward as a class. In this case, the law said on negligent misrepresentation, you needed to have reliance. And if reliance is the element which protects, and here's what happens with negligent misrepresentation. If a bank or an accounting firm or a law firm makes a negligent misrepresentation, generally, there's unlimited liability to an unlimited number of people. As the Supreme Court of Canada said, can't do that because it'll destroy commerce. So the law has put in that little hole and that trouble, you had to show reliance. Well, none of these investors relied on anything that GCO said. They were hearing they just heard the rumors or heard their broker say you should buy it, but they didn't go and read GCO's reports. So there was no reliance to be proved that wasn't individual. Now, there might be some, but there wasn't on the individual side. So as a result, it couldn't be a class action. And that's how we won. In the States, they couldn't prove fraud, so it got thrown out because they couldn't prove fraud on the market. You have to actually prove fraud. Now, I want to tell you, how long have we got?
Well, not that long, but
okay. I want to tell you one last little story.
Tell me.
So, in the doing of the American case, I actually appeared in Texarkana, Texas, and Texarkana if you ever sing Old Cotton Fields Back Home, that song, Texarkana is in it. It's an old cotton town. And they have the center of the docket, the rocket docket for class actions in the United States in Texarkana. That's other than the little old cotton, that's all that goes on there. The courthouse sits on Arkansas and on Texas on the border. So if you go in and you have guns, you check them in on the Texas side and go to the court. And then when you want to go to the Arkansas side as a lawyer, you get your guns back, go put them on the other side and go into the courtroom on that side. So before we went to the American court, we impaneled 24 jurors from what would be the jury pool. We paid for it all. And we put the entire case to all of these jurors. They sat 12 and 12 in different rooms. They were behind glass walls, so they didn't know we were looking, and we could hear what they were saying. And we heard them discuss the case. And they were of the view that Nesbitt Burns and all the rest of the defendants might be guilty. But anybody who invested in a gold mine in Indonesia did not deserve to win their case. These people knew nothing about shares. They didn't know what a share was. They wouldn't know what a bank was. They wouldn't know what Nesbitt Burns was. They surely didn't know a GCO. But they just concluded that anybody on both sides, in that this was just a case, they invested in the money in Indonesia, they deserved to lose their money. Now, that is a perverse finding, in my view, but it's so fascinating. It shows in the jury world now in the United States, you never know. If the glove fits, or doesn't fit, you acquit. Oh,
Right.
There you go.
So, and when we were talking about this before, we talked a little bit about, and you just mentioned it, which is that the court has historically recognized this balance between for allowing the market to grow and not collapsing a market, but also we want to have as fair a system as we can, right? And you also said to me that after Bre-X, there was sort of a dampening or diminishing of the mining sector for over a decade. And now out of Bre-X as well, we have these reforms. So why don't you tell us a little bit about those reforms and where we're at now?
Sure. So a number of experts, but particularly Tommy Allen, and I think Peter Day had something to it too. They were asked by the government to design a cause of action, which was one which did not require reliance when you're dealing with secondary market trading. So if you make statements which turn out to be negligent in the secondary market trading, which is what was happening here because it was already trading, then could you have a cause of action where you didn't have reliance, knowing that without reliance, it's unlimited numbers of people, and the Supreme Court of Canada won't allow it. So they designed one which has limits on amounts of money, which has new defenses or defenses put inside the statute itself, namely reasonable investigation. And you have to have material misrepresentations. Ensure there has to be something that would move the market. So you can sue, you don't have to prove reliance, but there are new defenses and new individuals. And I have that case, which dealing with a company called South Gobi Minerals, which is ongoing and has now been going for 10 years. If you can believe it. And we're either coming to an end of it soon or we'll go to trial. And so I've seen how the statute now has worked itself out. And you can now have, in the Bre-X case, had the statute been passed before that case, then you would have been able to sue all of the defendants and subject to reasonable investigation. Then you, and proving that there were material misrepresentations, then subject to those two pieces, then you could carry forward with a lawsuit to some form of preclusion. And it could be done in a class action context. So the government moved to try and protect the industry on both sides. Don't leave it wide open, but have some result if there's something like negligent misrepresentation that occurred in the Bre-X case.
Well, I look forward to having you back to discuss that case whenever it settles or is decided. Thank you ever so much for your company today. Such a pleasure.
Well, it was such a pleasure. Thank you very much for the intelligent and interesting questions.